If you believe memory loss is just an unavoidable part of aging, what you're about to hear may completely challenge that idea. Because inside your body, even right now, there is a repair system working quietly in the background, one that doesn't depend on medication, doesn't require expensive treatment, and becomes most powerful while you are asleep. The surprising part is that most people never activate it, not because it doesn't exist, but because they were never told how. What if the real issue isn't that the brain is breaking down, but that it's simply not being given the right materials to rebuild itself at night when it does its deepest restoration work? And what if some of the most effective tools for protecting memory are not found in pharmacies, but in everyday foods that cost less than a daily cup of coffee? The truth, according to decades of nutritional neuroscience research, is that the brain does not slowly fade in a passive way. It responds constantly to what you feed it, how you sleep, and how well its natural cleaning and repair systems are supported. Many medical professionals focus on managing symptoms after decline begins, but there is a growing body of research suggesting that certain nutrients can actively support brain cell repair, improve memory function, and slow cognitive decline in measurable ways. One widely discussed study from researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles found that older adults who regularly consumed specific brain supporting foods showed up to a 47% lower risk of developing memory related cognitive decline compared to those who did not. That is nearly half the risk linked directly to diet patterns rather than medication or complex interventions. All of the scientific findings discussed here are based on peer reviewed research, and while they do not represent cures, they highlight something important. The brain remains responsive to nutrition even in later life. Before we go deeper, there is one detail that often surprises people in the research. The strongest protective effects are not necessarily coming from rare or expensive superfoods, but from simple ingredients already present in most kitchens. And in fact, the most powerful item on this list is something many people throw away without realizing its value. According to multiple academic findings, compounds found in this overlooked food may improve the brain's ability to clear toxic waste during sleep by as much as 38%, a process directly linked to long term memory health. We will return to that later because understanding why sleep matters is essential to understanding why food matters. During deep sleep, the brain activates a specialized cleaning mechanism, often described in neuroscience as a waste clearance system, responsible for flushing out metabolic byproducts that accumulate during the day. When this system is supported properly, cognitive function tends to remain sharper for longer periods of life. Now, before continuing, I want to ask something that researchers often consider important when studying cognitive health patterns. Your personal experience matters here. How old are you right now? And have you noticed any subtle changes in memory, focus, or mental speed over the past few years? These small changes are often where prevention begins, not after major decline, but during early shifts that are easy to overlook. Understanding this helps frame why the next section is so important, because we are going to break down 5 specific foods ranked from strong to exceptional that research has linked with measurable improvements in brain function. And starting at number 5, we begin with something extremely common, often underestimated, yet scientifically powerful in its effect on memory systems when used correctly. At number 5 are wild blueberries, a food that appears simple on the surface but has been studied extensively for its neurological effects. Many people have heard general claims about blueberries being good for the brain, but controlled studies have gone far deeper than that. Research conducted at Tufts University focused specifically on older adults between the ages of 68 and 84 and found that daily intake of wild blueberries over a 1 to 2 week period led to measurable improvements in episodic memory, which refers to the ability to recall specific events, conversations, and lived experiences. In practical terms, the cognitive improvement observed in participants was compared to a reversal of roughly 2.5 years of age related memory decline, which is a significant shift for a relatively simple dietary change. The mechanism behind this effect is particularly important for aging brains. As we get older, the protective barrier that regulates what enters the brain becomes more permeable allowing more inflammatory compounds and oxidative stress to affect neural tissue. Wild blueberries contain high levels of anthocyanins, natural plant pigments responsible for their deep color, which act as protective agents against this oxidative stress. These compounds help reduce cellular damage and support signaling pathways linked to brain cell communication and repair. One of the key biological factors involved is a protein associated with neural growth and plasticity, which supports the strengthening of existing neural connections and may assist in forming new ones. What makes this especially relevant is not just what blueberries contain, but how they are consumed. Research suggests that frozen wild blueberries may actually preserve or enhance the availability of beneficial compounds due to how freezing affects plant cell structure. Timing also appears to matter, with some studies suggesting that consuming them in the evening may align better with the brain's natural nighttime repair cycles. Combining them with healthy fats, such as yogurt or olive oil, may further improve nutrient absorption, particularly in older adults whose digestive efficiency naturally declines with age. This is not about dramatic transformation overnight, but about consistently supporting the brain with compounds it can actually use during its most active recovery phase. And while wild blueberries offer a strong foundation for brain support, the next food on this list moves into an entirely different category of neurological impact, one that directly influences brain structure itself and the speed at which cognitive decline may occur. Coming in at number four, we move from plant based compounds into something that directly rebuilds the structural foundation of the brain itself. This is where the conversation shifts from protection to actual reconstruction at a cellular level. The food is fatty fish, particularly wild caught salmon, mackerel, and sardines. At first, this may sound familiar, and many people dismiss it because they think they already understand the advice. But what most people never hear is how deeply this nutrient is tied to the physical structure of the brain and how dramatically its importance increases with age. To understand this properly, we need to talk about a specific fat called DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. It is not just another nutrient your body uses for energy, it is one of the primary structural components of brain tissue. In fact, a large portion of the brain's dry weight is fat, and DHA makes up a major part of that composition. You can think of it less like a supplement and more like construction material. Without it, the brain is not just functioning less efficiently, it is literally missing part of its physical framework. This is why studies, including long term research from institutions such as Rush University Medical Center, have consistently found that higher DHA levels are associated with significantly slower cognitive decline in older adults. In some cases, the rate of decline has been observed to be reduced by over half compared to those with lower intake levels. What makes this even more important after age 65 is how the body changes its ability to process fats. Earlier in life, the body can convert plant based omega 3 sources into DHA to some degree, but that conversion efficiency drops significantly with age. This means that relying on sources like flaxseed or chia alone becomes less effective over time. The brain increasingly depends on preformed DHA that comes directly from marine sources. This is where fatty fish becomes especially valuable because it delivers DHA in a form the body can use immediately without conversion loss. Regular intake, even just a few times per week, has been associated with measurable improvements in cognitive stability and memory retention over time. There is also a practical aspect that is often overlooked. Preparation methods significantly influence how much of this nutrient actually survives cooking. High heat frying, for example, can degrade a large portion of omega 3 content, while gentler methods like baking or steaming preserve it far more effectively. Some studies also suggest that pairing fatty fish with leafy greens may support better integration of these fats into brain cell membranes due to the way certain vitamins assist in lipid metabolism. This is not about strict dieting rules, but about understanding how small changes in preparation can affect long term brain health outcomes. I once worked with a patient named Margaret, a retired school teacher in her 70s, who had completely removed fish from her diet decades earlier after being told to reduce dietary fat for heart health. Over time, she began to notice increasing difficulty with concentration and short term recall. When she reintroduced fatty fish a few times per week alongside other dietary changes, she reported noticeable improvements in her mental clarity within months. While individual experiences vary, What stood out in her case was not a sudden transformation, but a gradual return of mental sharpness that she believed she had lost permanently. That distinction is important because it reflects what much of the research suggests. The brain often responds slowly but consistently to sustained nutritional support. Now, while fatty fish works at the level of rebuilding structural integrity in the brain, the next food on this list operates in a completely different way. Instead of providing raw material, it appears to influence the brain's own repair signaling system, essentially telling neurons when and how to regenerate. This is where things become even more interesting because we are no longer just talking about protection or structure, but about active biological repair pathways being influenced by diet in real time. At number three, we move into something that feels less like nutrition and more like biological signaling, almost as if the brain is being instructed to repair itself more efficiently. This is where food begins to interact not just with structure or protection, but with the regeneration systems inside the nervous system. The focus here is lion's mane mushroom, a natural compound that has been studied for its potential role in supporting nerve health and cognitive function, particularly in older adults experiencing early signs of decline. Lion's mane is a distinctive mushroom with a white, cascading appearance, often described as looking like flowing strands or a dense waterfall of fibers. While it has been used traditionally in East Asian diets and herbal practices for centuries, modern research has only recently begun to explore its neurological effects in a controlled setting. One of the most frequently referenced studies comes from Japan, where researchers conducted a controlled clinical trial involving adults between 50 and 80 years old who were experiencing mild cognitive decline. Over a period of several weeks, participants who received lion's mane extract showed measurable improvements in cognitive performance compared to those who received a placebo. What makes this particularly interesting is not just that improvement occurred, but what happened after supplementation stopped. In several observations, cognitive benefits began to decrease within weeks once intake was discontinued. This suggests that the effect is not permanent or stored long term in the body, but instead depends on continued intake to support ongoing neurological activity. In other words, it behaves less like a one time intervention and more like a sustained support mechanism for brain function. The proposed mechanism behind this effect involves compounds that appear to influence nerve growth pathways. These compounds are thought to interact with nerve growth factor, a naturally occurring protein in the body that plays a key role in maintaining and repairing neurons. Nerve growth factor is essential for keeping neural connections healthy, supporting the insulation around nerve fibers, and maintaining the efficiency of communication between brain cells. As people age, levels of this signaling activity naturally decline, which may contribute to slower cognitive processing and reduce memory performance over time. Lion's mane appears to stimulate or support this pathway, encouraging the brain to maintain better structural communication between neurons. Rather than acting as a stimulant or short term cognitive enhancer, it is more closely associated with long term maintenance of neural integrity. This distinction is important because it places the focus not on immediate effects, but on gradual support of the systems responsible for memory formation and recall. There is also emerging research suggesting that certain compounds in lion's mane may cross the blood brain barrier, allowing them to interact directly with neural tissue. While research is still ongoing and not all mechanisms are fully understood, early findings point toward a relationship between these compounds and improved signaling efficiency within the brain's repair systems. Some scientists believe this may help explain why participants in clinical studies showed improvements in memory and focus over time rather than immediate, short lived changes. From a practical perspective, lion's mane is available in both food and supplement forms. It can be cooked in simple ways, often sauteed gently in oil or butter, and is sometimes described as having a mild, slightly seafood like flavor. It is also commonly taken in extract form for more consistent dosing in research setting. Some studies suggest that combining it with nutrients like vitamin D may enhance its effectiveness, although this area is still being actively explored. What makes lion's mane particularly notable in the context of brain health is that it represents a shift from passive nutrition to active biological support. Instead of simply supplying the brain with building blocks, it may help influence how the brain maintains and repairs itself over time. This is an important distinction, especially when considering age related cognitive decline, which is often linked not only to damage, but to reduced repair efficiency within neural systems. Now, as we move toward the final two foods on this list, the focus shifts again because the next item is not just about brain structure or repair signaling, but about one of the most fundamental and misunderstood building blocks of brain chemistry itself, something that has been heavily misrepresented for decades in mainstream dietary advice. At number two, we arrive at one of the most misunderstood foods in modern nutrition history, and also one of the most important for maintaining memory and cognitive stability as we age. This is eggs, specifically whole, pasture raised eggs, and more precisely, the nutrient contained in the yolk that has been repeatedly overlooked in mainstream dietary advice for decades. For many years, eggs were unfairly placed into the category of foods to limit, largely due to concerns about cholesterol. That message became deeply embedded in public health guidance, and many people still avoid egg yolks out of habit or fear. But what modern research has made increasingly clear is that this perspective missed a critical point about how the brain actually works. The brain is not separate from cholesterol, it depends on it. In fact, a large portion of brain tissue is composed of fat and cholesterol, and these components are essential for the structure and function of neurons. Cholesterol plays a structural role in maintaining the integrity of cell membranes and in supporting the myelin sheath, which is the protective insulation around nerve fibers. Without this insulation, communication between brain cells becomes less efficient, which can affect memory speed, clarity of thought, and information recall. In this sense, cholesterol is not something the brain simply tolerates, but something it actively uses as part of its physical architecture. However, the most important compound in eggs when it comes to memory function is not cholesterol, but choline. Choline is a nutrient that serves as a direct precursor to acetylcholine, one of the brain's primary neurotransmitters involved in memory formation, learning, and recall. You can think of acetylcholine as part of the brain's communication system, responsible for transmitting signals between neurons that allow thoughts and memories to be processed and stored effectively. A single egg yolk contains a significant amount of choline, contributing meaningfully to daily requirements, especially in older adults whose dietary intake may fall short. Research from long term population studies, including work conducted at major universities, has shown that higher dietary choline intake is associated with better cognitive performance and fewer structural markers of brain aging. These include reduced white matter changes, which are small but significant alterations in brain tissue that have been linked to memory decline and reduced processing speed. What becomes particularly important with age is that the body's ability to produce choline internally declines. This means that dietary intake becomes increasingly important over time rather than less. In practical terms, the brain becomes more dependent on external sources of choline to maintain optimal neurotransmitter production. When intake is too low, acetylcholine levels may drop, which can directly affect memory formation and recall efficiency. This is why whole eggs, not just egg whites, are emphasized in nutritional research related to brain health. The yolk contains the majority of the beneficial compounds, including choline and fat soluble nutrients that support brain structure. Cooking method also matters. Gentle preparation methods such as poaching or low heat scrambling help preserve nutrient integrity, while excessive heat can reduce some of the more delicate compounds. There is also a synergistic effect when eggs are combined with healthy fats such as avocado. This pairing is not just a dietary preference, but has a biochemical basis, as fat improves the absorption of certain nutrients and supports their integration into cell membranes. These small combinations can influence how effectively the brain utilizes the nutrients being consumed. What is often overlooked in discussions about eggs and brain health is that cognitive decline is not always the result of sudden damage, but of gradual nutritional insufficiency over time. When key building blocks like choline are consistently underconsumed, the brain may slowly operate below its optimal capacity. This does not necessarily cause immediate symptoms, but over years, it can contribute to noticeable changes in memory and mental clarity. This is why reintroducing nutrient dense whole foods like eggs can sometimes feel like a return of mental sharpness for individuals who had previously avoided them for long periods. It is not a dramatic reversal, but a restoration of missing inputs that the brain relies on to function efficiently. Now, as we move into the final and most surprising food on this list, we shift from structural support and neurotransmitter production into something even more fundamental: the brain's overnight cleaning and repair system. This next food is not about building or signaling alone, but about enhancing the process that physically clears waste from the brain while you sleep, a process that is directly tied to long term memory preservation and neurological health.